my name is Erin Peña. I've been beading for about 20 years, and I've been teaching beading for about 2 or 3 years. In 2025, I was awarded a grant by the Minnesota State Arts Board to make this series of video tutorials covering the basics of the kind of geometric beading I do. I have a separate video covering the tools and materials I use, but briefly, the beads we are using are Miyuki Delica beads, cylinder beads, size 11, fireline thread, 4-pound test. The cat is named Ash. She will probably be joining us intermittently. So at long last, we are joining shapes together to make sculptures. Little sculptures, but still, graduating from 2 dimensions to the 3rd dimension. We've practiced doing 4 flat shapes, squares like these, also triangles, pentagons, and hexagons. And today we are going to use 6 squares sewn together to make a cube. I chose a cube because, it's all the same shape, so it's pretty easy, or pretty simple to explain anyways. And there's enough space, like when you're stitching things together, there's like enough space to get your fingers in there, which is also why I'm using fairly large squares here. These are 10 beads on a side. You can go smaller, I have this little guy here which is 4 beads on a side, but it will be harder to get your fingers in there, so that's just something to be aware of. So I think, 6 or 10 beads or even larger is a good place to start. I'm doing all of the squares of my cube in different colors because I played with Legos as a child, candidly. But you can do it in whatever color you want. I would advise using the same color on your joining row between all of the squares. You can see I have used a separate color also for the increase cycles like we were practicing, just for visual ease, basically. I didn't do that with this guy, and it's the same process. So this video will be a little different in that we're not going to go step by step, square by square. I've got all the squares made already, and we're just going to cover the final step of joining them together. So if you need a refresher on making squares, you can go and check out that video. And I'll be pausing a lot during this video to give you a chance to, pause and make your next square. I have all my squares already made because this is an example video, but that's usually not how I go. Usually what I do is when I'm making something that is different components stitched together, I'll make one component, then I'll make the second component and sew it together. I'll make the third component and sew it together. That just makes it easier for me to keep track of where I am in the work and what is next, rather than having these all, here that I need to then sort through to see which one is first and which one is last. So when we join components together, flat beaded shapes together, basically what we're doing is we're sharing beads between each shape. So you'll recall when we did our practice shapes how I had you add one last row with a no increase row in a different color. That is the row that we're going to use to join our different squares together, and it's going to be, that row will be shared between 2 shapes, kind of like a hinge or a zipper. So we'll take this one at a time. Your first square, just make a regular square, however big you want your cube to be. Mine is 10 beads on a side, so 40 beads all around at the end. And I have ended on a row with no beads in the corner, and I've just done joining row all around. Okay, so first square. Second square is the same, except when you come to that last row, that last no beads in the corner row, sew through your beads so that you're coming out of a corner. Here, well, yeah, it'll be down here, I guess, from where your thread is coming out, because you'll sew through the beads so that you're coming out of a corner, and then you'll just sew 3 sides of that no increase row. Then let me thread my tail here. Go, okay. The next step, you see how these line up together? Basically, kind of like a zipper, like teeth in a zipper. We're going to use these beads as the next beads in this row, in this no corner row. So hold them together. It doesn't have to be right up next to each other, but just go. Pretend that you're picking those beads up and sewing them in place. Just like that, one at a time. Say hello to Ash as she puts her face in my face. Okay, just go like 2 or 3 beads here. Don't go all the way down, because what you do after 2 or 3 beads is you pull it tight and see how it just zips together. And we'll keep going. 2 or 3 beads at a time, or even 1 at a time, pulling after each one, whatever you're comfortable with. I wouldn't go more than 2 or 3 because that'll put too much stress on your thread and it could break when you pull it. Don't worry too much about the angle you're holding it at. Like, don't worry about getting it into the perfect square angle, cube angle. Those hinges are very flexible, which I'll demonstrate once we're done with this here. Just gonna keep going all the way down. One at a time. Okay, we've gone through our last no corner bead here. So after that last no corner bead, you can go through this guy here to complete that side on your second square, the orange square, and then we can just weave our thread in. Do our little figure 8. Trim the thread off. Okay. And like I said, these hinges are really flexible, so don't worry about holding it at any specific angle. The piece will stiffen up, like as you add more components, it'll just get progressively stiffer. Of course, the larger you make it, the looser it's going to be, just because of weight and tension and all that good stuff. But still, at this size, it'll be stiff enough. All right, so next, as you may have guessed, is our third component, number 3 of 6. It's my yellow guy here. And this time, when you get to that last joining row, again, sew through so you're coming out of a corner, and then just do 2 sides. It's hard to thread when it's far away from me. Okay, there it is. Okay, so this guy is going to fit right here, like this. You don't have to hold it like that the whole time. We're just gonna go, that's just to illustrate, we're gonna go one at a time. So same principle as before, pretending that that joining row on the other shape is the same as picking up beads, and just one at a time, do the first couple, pull it tight, I think the biggest mistake that I sometimes make doing joining rows like this is if like I drop one of my pieces and it twists around so that I get a loop in the thread, or it's backwards, which doesn't really matter with this piece because it's all symmetrical, but it can make it uneven to have little loops of thread in there, or if like I accidentally sew through a loop or whatever, you know, make a knot like that. Which is another reason to go just one bead at a time rather than a couple at a time. Okay, almost done with this first side. Okay, we're sewing through our last joining bead. Then we're gonna sew through the corner, so we're coming down our next side. Move this guy over here, like this. And just go one at a time. You can see how this would be harder with a smaller square, like you see now what I meant about having space to put your fingers in there. Usually when I'm working on that small of a scale, like the green cube, I can't put my fingers in here. I have to hold it all on the outside, which is a little more difficult. I usually drop it more often when I'm doing that, and smaller isn't necessarily the same as faster. Definitely not the same as easier when it comes to beadwork like this, geometric beadwork. I think I've said that before. It bears repeating though. Okay, just about done here. Through our last joining row, through the corner here, and then we can tie it off. Oh, cat. She's in a weird mood today. The encroaching winter, who knows? God knows I'm in a weird mood about winter. But but that's more or less par for the course. Okay, weave it in with our little figure 8. And trim it off. Okay, and this is what we have right now. Starting to get three-dimensional. And at this stage, you can kind of see what I meant about preferring to do one component at a time and stitch it to the main sculpture rather than having it all laid out. Because with each successive piece we add, the number of joining rows we need to do changes, because we already have, joining rows that we're using, and there'll be more and more of those as we go on. So for our fourth piece here, it's again 2 joining rows. For the fifth, it'll be just 1. And I guess, I'm sorry, I misspoke. I didn't mean like 2 entire joining rows. I meant 2 sides of 1 joining row. Just 1 side. And then with the last one, the 6th one, none, because they'll all already be on the shape. So, here we go with Mr. Green. Okay. It'll go right here. Or, conversely, it could go right here. It could go right here. It doesn't matter to me. And it may matter to you, where you want your finished cube to look like, where you want the colors to be touching. If you're doing all the same, then it doesn't matter. But it's the same principle as the yellow one we just added. Just go through and do this together. You'll have to forgive me if I'm in a little bit of a weird headspace today. I haven't done one of these videos in a while, so I have to reconvince myself that I remember how this works. Which is to say, I hope it is working and everything is visible and sensible. Oops, got my thread caught. Get out of there. Yeah. Okay, more on this side. There we go. Through the corner. And down this side. beads at a time. More. Okay, through the corner. And then we can dye it off. Alrighty. Okay, time for the fifth piece. And like I said, just do one side of the joining row. It's going to go either right here or right here. Doesn't matter to me. May or may not matter to you, depending on, you know, what you want your color arrangement to be at the end. Whether or not you're doing a symmetrical pattern. Okay. Don't worry about pushing your shape like out of true, like what I'm doing with the green here. At this size, these sculptures are very forgiving, and there is just an inherent amount of flexibility involved. So as long as you're not like wrenching on it, you know, it's gonna be fine. When we're done with this cube, I'm going to use this same video to talk a little theory at you. Not like math theory per se, but more like beading theory. I'll talk through putting different shapes together and what that might look like. Got sloppy. Wasn't pulling tight often enough. Wanted to go back and check my work there. Make sure. Sometimes if you go too many beads at a time before pulling tight, you may think you've pulled it tight, but you may end up with a little tag end of thread, you know, just hang it out. And that can come loose later on and put your beads out of true. So it's not a bad idea to check your work if you're not sure. I love bright colors like these. I guess that's probably been pretty obvious. They say the first colors that you see are the ones you keep with you. I was born in San Diego, and it's a lot of bright colors down there. Much different than where I grew up, Seattle. Which is not to say I don't still love, pine tree green and ocean blue. But you gotta love some fiesta wear, man. Okay, through the corner and bind it off. One thing that I like to do when I'm making a sculptural shape like that, which I haven't been paying attention to because this is a practice piece, but one thing I like to do is to, as often as possible, get my thread coming out on the inside, so those teeny tiny short tag ends will be covered up by the sculpture. They'll be on the inside. That's not always possible, of course, various angles and whatever at play, but it's just a nice little trick. A couple things I want to talk about right here. You can see how the squares are not quite flat. There's a little bend in there, and some of them are going in and some of them are pushing out. You can do both or either. I will say over time, as you handle the square, it'll have a tendency towards pushing inwards anyways, just from being handled. And it's not impossible to pop them back out again. It's kind of a pain in the butt, though. Requires some patience and finagling. Yeah, there's a little bit out. But the tendency is usually for it to just go in like that, which is fine. Okay. Oh, yeah, also, in case this occurs to you, when I first started doing this, joining different shapes together, I would loop these 3, or however many, loop the corner beads together, like so, through all 3 of them, make a loop. I no longer do that because I don't find that it actually adds anything to the structural integrity of the piece, and basically you're just left with like a lot of visible thread, and it can get messy. So I no longer feel that necessary, but it's not wrong if you want to do that, especially if you're having trouble with tension otherwise. Like, maybe it will help to keep your piece more stable, but you don't have to worry about that, I guess is what I'm saying, if you don't want to. Okay. Let's get this needle threaded. Maybe. Okay. Now, this last one, as you may have guessed, is going to be the trickiest. Number one, because the last piece that you place on any sculpture like this, any enclosed sculpture, is always going to be the tightest. Like, it's going to be the least flexible. And also what's going to happen is, on this first side, you can have it up like this, but once you hit the second side, you're closing off that cavity inside, so you can no longer like hold it steady with your thumb in there. You're going to have to hold it on the outside. And that won't be too tough. Like once you have a full side joined, it'll just stay there without much persuasion. But it can be a little tough to hold it firm enough to not fall out, but not so firm that you squish it. There's a balance there. So, one at a time. And I'm already holding it on the outside, but you can still do the inside thing if you want to. That just feels a little less natural to me at this point. So, first side. Pull it tight and try not to pull so hard that you wrench it out of your grasp and it goes flying across the room and your cats pick it up in their mouth and carry it somewhere to places unknown. That might just be a me problem, but you know, just in case. I like to be upfront with the fact that there is a solid 30% chance that any of my pieces have been blessed with a ride in my cat's mouth. Either one of them. They both do it. I don't know why. I'm rotating the piece as I work, just, because of how I like to pull what feels most natural to me. And I know I've mentioned this before, but you can, sew with your left hand, you can sew counterclockwise, like, it's all good. It's a question of what works best for you. I'm not an ambi turner, so I can only show this one way, basically, without making an absolute mess. But the principle is the same. When I hold my piece like this on the outside, I like to put pressure on the corners and on the sides where the seams are, rather than putting pressure like on just the beadwork, because there's more structural, not structural integrity, but there's just more in the corners, right? There's more reinforcement, I guess. It's a lot firmer, so I can grip it a little bit tighter than I would be able to just like grip in there and not worry about squishing it or having it fly off. Like, I'm applying a decent amount of pressure right now, and it's not bending or warping at all. So that's a pro tip. Like, when you hold it, aim for the strong parts. that go a little too long before pulling. Felt it pop. One more side. I'm nearing the end of, the initial run of videos I had planned to make. I still have ideas. Some of them I have to figure out the tech for. But if you have anything that you are particularly interested in, let me know. And bind it off. This part can be the more dangerous, just because, you're at the end of a tight sculpture and you're trying to sew your needle over top of these beads. You can't go back into the sculpture. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll even take the needle off and thread it by hand just for this weaving off bit, this weaving in bit. It's slower, but it's safer if you're worried about breaking beads. So just go careful and you'll be fine. Okay, we have this Lego looking cube. Woohoo! All right, hang tight and let's talk a little bit about other types of 3D sculptures we could do. Okay, welcome back. I'm trying to do this and also wrangle a wild ash, so you'll have to forgive me if I get a little distracted. Okay, so we just talked about the practicalities of joining different components, different flat shapes together. We built this guy. And I guess now I wanted to use this space to talk a little bit about I guess some ways to think about how to join other shapes, right? And also, throw some words out there that will give you places to start on Wikipedia. That's where I go a lot of the time to look up new shapes, different interesting ways of joining things together. So we built a cube, and a cube is what is called a platonic solid. A platonic solid. There's only 5 of those guys, and if you've ever played with gaming dice, then you've seen them before. They're all made of, in a platonic solid, every face is made of the same shape. There are other rules as well, geometry rules that I do not understand, involving vertices as such. I think I've mentioned before that I have no formal training in this. It's very vibes based. So, as I understand it. This is called a tetrahedron, or a tetra. These are very useful shapes. I use them a lot. Made of equilateral triangles. Cube, 6 squares, our buddy. Octahedron, also equilateral triangles. You may notice it's basically just 2 of these guys stuck end to end. Dodecahedron, same as this guy, actually. It's 12 pentagons formed together. And y'all know I love pentagons. And an isosahedron, also equilateral triangles, 20 of them. So that's where I started, basically, when I was joining shapes together, making variations of those guys. You probably noticed that none of these involve hexagons, which is a shape we learned how to make, and that's because hexagons tile, right? You can't have like a sculpture, like a 3-dimensional sculpture that's entirely hexagons. You have to mix it up with other shapes. Triangles, squares, pentagons. When you mix pentagons and hexagons into a sphere, you get a soccer ball. Buckyball, it's sometimes called. That's, I think, comes from chemistry parlance. I'm not sure. There's like some molecules that form that shape or something. Again, this is all Wikipedia. So a couple more phrases, terms that I want to send your way, aside from Platonic solids, is Archimedean solids, and Johnson solids. There are rules for what makes an Archimedean solid, what makes a Johnson solid, but the basic gist of it seems to be that... Hello, Ash, I told you. The basic gist of it seems to be that it's different shapes stuck together, right? Like Platonic solids are all one shape. Archimedean solids, different shapes. So this guy is an isosododecahedron. And what it is 12 pentagons and 20 equilateral triangles, which is to say, it's an isosahedron and a dodecahedron smushed together. And I really like the Archimedean solids, especially. I've only recently learned the term Johnson solids and started messing with them. But the Archimedean solids, especially, there's more of these nice spherical shapes. I like mixing different shapes. I find that makes for more interesting opportunities for pattern, for texture. But given that it is the mixing of two different shapes, we have to talk a little bit of math now. Forgive me. So when we were making our cube, we used 6 squares that were all the same shape and size, right? They all ended with 10 beads per side, and they all fit together like a zipper. They went together really nicely. Easy enough. So we can take from that, one of the things we can take from that is that mixing shapes that have different sizes, or which is to say different numbers of beads per side, is going to give us something very different than, a standard regular polyhedra, a standard regular shape like this, which is fine, you know, it's super cool, but it is just something to bear in mind when you're planning your sculptures. Going off from that, what happens when we're making sculptures that mix together more than one type of shape, right? We're mixing pentagons and triangles here. The obvious answer sounds like, well, just make sure that every shape is the same size, right? The same number of beads per side, and it'll zip together all nice. And that is true, but if you followed along with us making the 4 different shapes that we did originally, triangle, square, pentagon, hexagon, you may be remembering now that they each have a different type of increase cycle. So the triangle and the hexagon each increase by 1 bead per increase cycle per side. So like you could have a hexagon and a triangle that have 3, 4, 5, 6 beads per side. That is not necessarily the case with the pentagon and the square. The pentagon increases by 2 beads per increase cycle, even numbers, so it goes 2, 4, 6, 8 beads per side per increase cycle. The square increases by 3 beads per increase cycle, so it goes 4, 7, 10, 13. And there are ways to modify this, right? Like you can mess with an increase cycle. You can skip beads, you can add beads. That will give you shapes that are not quite as flat. And that might be fine. But if you want to stick with the flat shapes, like say you don't want, a 5-sided pentagon, because that'll be a pentagon with a little cup to it. You want it to be nice and flat. You'll need to have a pentagon with 6 sides, which means that you can only mix that pentagon with hexagons or equilateral triangles, because you can engineer those to be 6 beads per side. But the square, if, again, you're unwilling to modify, the square skips from 4 to 7. It doesn't land on 6. And I hope that makes sense, the way I'm explaining it. And again, I do want to stress, like, it's okay to modify your shapes. Like, we'll go over that in another video, like playing with increase cycles, to see what that looks like, to see how you would do that. Because increase cycles are a tool, right? They're not gospel. It's just a starting point. But when you're using these increase cycles that, don't just add 1 bead, but add 2 beads or 3 beads per side, it makes the math a little more complicated, right? Because you need to make sure that these shapes you're using that may have varying increase cycles are going to end up where you need them to, with matching beads per side. And that was pretty much all I wanted to talk about here, was the importance of, like, planning your shapes, I guess. Like, it would be, annoying to, like, start making all the triangles for one piece, and then, like, say you made all the triangles for this guy first, and you made them, like, 5 beads instead of 4 beads, and then you were like, wait a second, pentagons don't land easily on 5 beads. That would be very annoying to have that happen. So yeah, well, feel free to let me know if any of that did or did not make sense. If you have any follow-up questions. Yeah, and next time I think we probably will talk about increase cycles and what it would mean, what it would look like to modify those. Yeah, and I will see you next time.